Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins and I'm super excited to have Topher on today. We had the pleasure of meeting in person last year at Acapulco and I interviewed you from Acapulco. That was a little bit hairy thanks to all of your good technology. We were able to do it. So I do recommend going to listen to that one. And so welcome, Topher. I'm super happy to have you here.
It's great to see you, Beth. It's almost been a year since we met in person, so this is nice to see you in this way.
Yeah, likewise. And so I'm sure people are familiar with you. I just wanted to let people know who might be new to the King Heroes journey that this is a place to come and speak your truth, even if you don't think that other people are going to agree with you or like it or approve of you or those kind of things. And hoping that people will take the lead of my guests and just say and be who they are without feeling like that's going to somehow ruin you or are we not moving out of that era where we need to rely on other people's approval to get by? What do you think, Topher?
I think both polarities are occurring right now very, very strongly. I think there's tons of people that are opting to be led, and then there's tons of people that are opting to lead. So I think both polarities, as the veil thins, I think both of those options are very prevalent at the time.
Yeah, there you go. So we're going to get deep into all kinds of interesting subjects like that. We are live on Facebook and my what still feels like new YouTube. It's almost at 1,000 subs again. I know people are being unsubscribed, as Virginia was telling me. So come and check in. The best way to stay connected with the King Heroes journey is to go to my website, bethmartins.com. You can see the URL going by at the bottom. Sign up for example, an archetype quiz to find out where you are in the path of purpose. I should have asked you to do that earlier. I'm thinking of it now, but you could always do that later if you like. We're also live on Rumble and X and Vigilante TV and Rockfin. So there's a Rockfin link here in the chat if anybody wants to jump over there. Hello to you guys. And so yeah, I think that's all for now. I'll just say before I forget, if I don't say it again, that on Monday, Don Lester is coming on to talk about medically assisted dying, which has been a very big subject in Canada. And I think there's a lot of things that are true and not true in that arena. So stay tuned Monday for that. And if you're not familiar with Topher, he is a builder, a body worker, and astrologist. I've had an excellent reading from you, by the way. That to this day, I'm still getting some value from that and
Beautiful.
seeing things in my life. Yeah. And having breakthroughs. You saw some stuff that it just felt like it was impossible to see. It couldn't have been seen just by knowing me, but there it was in my chart. You could describe to a T a couple of my really signature experiences that once they came more to my awareness, I was able to work on them, and it feels like it's smoothed out a lot of stuff. So highly recommend Topher for those. Are you still doing those readings?
Yes, I call them a celestic profile. I'm trying to step away from the astrology memes because so much of astrology that I know of is based, like, I'm a very I guess you'd say geometrically precise person, especially with construction. And so much of astrology is essentially based on tropical astrology, where the archetypes are what the archetypes that which are great, but the signs are disconnected from the constellations. And to me, just it's my personal preference set, that makes no sense. And in my training in polarity therapy, it's all about precision. Like, you have to kind of know what the polarity of the dominant sign is. And so I found the phenomenology of the true sidereal charting systems to be much, much more accurate for people. Like, you could really get the refinement that normal tropical astrology doesn't provide.
Right. So you're going right for the celestial. Let's leave that astrology out of there. And do you want to say anything more about your other work before we jump in with some of our topics today?
Sure. I'm a dome builder essentially. I got my start in construction with building rocket mass heaters and cob, doing like cob art installs. Cob, for those of you that don't know, is just a mixture of clay, sand, and natural fibers. And I would essentially sculpt different art installations. And then I got into sculpting houses. And I also sculpt people. Like that's been my longest held profession as a deep tissue myofascial release masseuse. And so anything where I can get my hands and my feet into it, I'm a happy camper. So as of late, my construction has evolved. I still do cob installations for rocket mass heating, but I now do much larger structures. I'm doing domes, and I don't only do domes, but I essentially do buildings that have curves in it. And I always have all the elemental energies in my construction, and it's just fun. I'm at the point in my life where I'm teaching other people that are really excited about all the weirdness that I've been a part of for a long time. So I'm really kind of leaning into being a teacher now, a teacher and like sort of a project manager type more than anything. So it's really exciting for me.
You sent me such a great little video yesterday that I'd seen on your Telegram. I was just trying to grab your Telegram link to the channel. It's not showing up when I pull it up. So if you feel like it either share it to me in the private chat or just drop it right in the chat here on StreamYard. And I was glad that there was people inside the dome because I got to see the scale of the dome that way.
Yes.
They look little when you look from that aerial view, but it was
Hmm.
actually huge. And
Hmm.
anyway, we won't go super deep into that, but I do recommend looking into it. It would be amazing to get you to build us a dome in Missouri
Yes,
sometime.
yes. Yeah, it's the type that I can build any type of dome. I've built geodesic, I've built earth bag, now I'm building something called a Japanese star dome. And you'll appreciate this, like this kind of ties into the celestics or the astronomy type of things, is that they make a perfect sundial because the center of the bubble per se, the hemisphere, always has an opening in it. We end up enclosing that, for the permanent structures. But as you're building it, depending on what time of year you're building it, you can see the analema on the ground, you know? And this was like one of the big wake up moments for me when I was in Central America, was like my massage area that I had was one of these domes that had an open cupola. And I would watch the sun move on the ground of my dome, and it was like that moment from Castaway with Tom Hanks, where he's drawing the analema on the cave wall because the light shoots through, at different points of the year, and so he could demarcate what time of year it was. So I had one of those types of moments where I could kind of be like, whoa, this is like a real thing. Like the angles of the sun and the intensity and like the structure, how it holds it. It's like it was one of those like real epiphanic moments for me.
Ooh, I like that word epiphanic.
Hmm.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome. Very, very good. And so today we're going to be talking about the uniqueness of each being. As I was just going around and listening to some of the interviews that people were doing of you and you were doing of others, I was picking out these. And it's one of my favorite subjects, the uniqueness of each being.
Hmm.
We're going to talk about what's real versus desires and cravings, another one of my favorite subjects.
Hmm.
We're going to talk about free will. If you're not familiar, I am the founder of the House of Free Will, so that's a big one for me. Um,
Wonderful.
yeah, what Topher calls spiritual trustafarians, which I love. I don't know exactly know what that means, but and I know Virginia. Where are the rest of our peeps? Come and say hi in the chat if anybody is here. Please do help share this out. I don't know, I just don't feel that dangerous. Why I would be shadow banned or they have to go unsub and take. I did an interview last week with Garrett Smith, and there was less views than there were viewers.
How's that possible?
No, I know. Like literally, they come after the fact and chop out the the stats. So it's kind of wild. There is Nevering and Mr. Thor at the door. Great to have you here. Good to
Awesome.
see you. Yeah, yeah, so good. And we're also going to talk about what you experienced in ashram. I share that experience with you. I went many times to an ashram in India. We're going to talk about the nature of a Saturn return in astrology. That's selfish because I think I'm still 4 years to my next Saturn return, but maybe how to prepare for that.
Right.
Uh, how we're moving out of the guru phase of spiritual development and into a new phase, which I just see so much evidence for. We'll talk about how disillusionment and sacred calling intersect and are related. Why vibration is location. That's very intriguing, rings true. I want to learn more about that. And then finally, the role that initiation experiences have in our lives. That I did a deep dive in my undergrad degree in anthropology into that as well. So we have so much in common. Oh, welcome, Ken from X. I always forget to say also that after these lives are done, the audio gets uploaded to Spotify and iTunes and all of the podcast channels if anybody wants to download and listen on the go. And they're definitely jamming me up. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's dive in with the first topic about the uniqueness of each being. What's something you'd like to share about that?
I've never met two people that are the same, including working on identical twins. I've probably worked on a dozen sets of identical twins, and everybody is completely unique, like without a doubt. And this kind of solves like the free will problem for me philosophically, because what I've seen is all of us actually perceive the world differently, like all of us. And what love ends up being between people is when you really want to know how the other being perceives.
Hmm.
Like you want to know how they see things. You and that want to is that what we would call love connection. Now that I have a daughter, I really see that. Like I really want to like see how she sees it. Like I really want to be in her little head and understand like just the little facets of everything. And so in just like doing all the body work I've done and doing all the celestic profiles I've done, nobody's the same. Like every single one of us is different, and our body's an antenna. So if all of our antenna arrays are different and they're tuned to a different frequency and our morphology is different, how we interact with the space around us is going to be different. So it's just a joy to understand like when I took myself out of essentially, you know, putting everybody in a box or trying to make everybody fit a narrative or a storyline, and I was just like, I came to the understanding like, wow, everybody is truly different for the reasons I said before. It's like now I don't harbor resentment, I don't harbor anger, I don't, there's nothing like trigger wise, other than when men that work for me are lazy, I don't get triggered. So it's kind of a cool thing for me in that regard. It's just like we're all on our own path, like wholly and uniquely. We come into this life alone, we leave this life alone. Not to say that you're ever really alone, because your spiritual body is always connected to the creator, but like the whole thing is how we actually get to have this subjective experience in a completely unique way. Like our subjectivity is sort of like our signature in a way. And yeah, it's just beautiful to see that in people's morphology, in people's cosmology, their astral body, their physiology. It's just wonderful to watch that.
It's completely miraculous to observe
Mhm.
because my next question is going to be about your cosmology, but the amount of, you know, how many times did God create a leaf on this tree? You can't see this one, maybe, but they're no two the same.
None,
It
none.
won't be identical, not even on the very same plant.
Yeah,
Right?
God doesn't like repeats. I think that was one of my first logic realizations as like a 4 or 5 year old. I heard somebody in church say, God is written, everything is done, and and I was just there as a little boy, and I was like, I knew I didn't like repeats. Like if my little self didn't like repeats, I'm like, God doesn't like repeats. Like that's not true. Like it was just like one of those things. Like no, like this isn't. It might be done in the sense that all potential is all. It's whole. If you look at it mathematically, but I think when we're made in the image and likeness of our Creator, we're given subjective free will. Objectively, things are going to happen, but subjectively, how we interpret it is our own thing. And I think God gets a kick out of it. Like he's just like, oh my God, I can't believe Beth saw it that way. Oh, Topher saw it that way. That's nuts. Like I think God gets this like huge amount of joy out of seeing how all these like little aspects of self are now experiencing this creation. Like I think it's a joy for him.
Yeah, is it all joy? There were times during the pandemic when I was talking to God, and I'm like, "Do you regret giving us free will? Is there any remorse?" Or like not expecting
Never,
that, but yeah, you don't think so? Yeah, yeah. Even
never.
even when it's a total shit show.
If it's existing, it's out of joy. The sponsorship energy of anything that's in material or thought form, or even you can go as subtle as intentional realms, it's the sponsor is utter joy.
Mm, brilliant. I love the conviction in your voice when you say that. So our overall topic is spontaneous generation, by the way, if you're not seeing how everything fits together. But so now I'm not saying it is a paradox, but there's also the installation of patterns, right? You can see them inside the psyche, you can see them in nature, you can see them, like we're going to talk about the Saturn return, how they're all representing archetypes that have a certain amount of fixed nature compared to all of the move and flow within that.
Mhm.
And so, um, but those cycles and seasons are never identical.
Right.
Do you see those as two polarities, that like utter uniqueness and then the certain amount of predictability through patterns, or how do you see that?
No, I don't. So you can never step in the same stream twice because the water is different, you're different. You can never go home because when you do go home, the home is different, you're different. And I think it's inbuilt into creation that if you idolize things, if you hold on to something, you're going to be disappointed. Like that's just the nature of life. Like if you have a great youth and then you hold on to your youth, you're gonna get old. If you have a great, elder time, you're gonna like your body's gonna pass on. Like whatever it is, it's going to change. It's gonna morph because we've been told straight up, make no idols here. Like don't actually don't plant your treasure here in the physical. Don't plant your treasure here where things are temporal. Your treasure, like your infinite self, your eternal self, is just here for like a toe dip. It's just like bloop, and it's just seeing like because I think souls actually come here. The way I've been able to distill it in my mind, I think souls actually come here to learn boundaries. And so when a soul comes and it has to learn boundaries, like what we would call an evil person is somebody that doesn't respect boundaries. And what we call the charitable, like the really good people, they are people that actually respect boundaries, right? And everything's a boundary layer. It's all about boundaries. Bop, bop, bop. And so I really see that like the soul, it comes here and it's like, oh, okay, there's a distinction, I'm distinct, there's a boundary layer between myself and my environment, supposedly, at least it's a perceived boundary layer, and then I'm just going to play this game of limitation as long as I can. I'm going to enjoy things to their fullest. That way the full emotional body can come through and all the soul experiences can happen, but at no point if will the idolization of anything here actually bring, you can't take any of it with you, you don't. So like it's one of those things is like you just come, you dip to us it seems like it's a decently long time because we're in linear time, but in eternity, this is like nothing. Like this is just like a little blip. And I'm really of the opinion that the souls come here just to experience limitation, understand limitation, so that they can have, like any of us who have gone through any trial and travail, after you get through it, you can teach others how to get through it. So in the future, quote unquote, future, when we have souls that we're close to in other venues, we can teach them about limitation and how to like navigate that whenever.
Nice. I love that. When you talk about the idolization of anything temporal, that to me right away reminds I'm in a um, rabbit hole. It's not a rabbit hole, but just got a new chew toy about identifying the identification of myself on the temporal. So whether that's on a thought or a feeling inside myself, my body, my sense of, who I am, or any of the meaning that I've given all of that, or even, people in my life, how the projection of our identity onto anything temporal creates a disturbance.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a really beautiful thing, because once you identify the identification, once you see that, and
Hmm.
then you see like, oh, well, who am I to notice that identification? Who must I be?
Right.
Right. Another one of my favorite questions is like, who am I?
It's the
And
question.
it is the question, exactly. And then could I gently lift that identity from there to me, who I am? And it's like a vacuum, right? All the disturbance just gets pulled through that awareness
Hmm.
and is gone. And then what you're describing is just so much more freedom in life. Like use the word play. A lot of people don't think of their lives as a playground.
Yes. Yes. I've noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been, I guess you would say, blessed in a way, in the sense that um, I've never really asked for permission to do that many things. I've never really stepped on people's toes, but like whatever I was interested in, I just jumped into. Um, and convention be damned. Like I don't care about convention at all. And it's really made my mother uneasy a lot. My father was much more of the risk taker, as an architect and things like that. But for me, yeah, this world, I really think fortune favors the brave. There's never been a moment in my life where I've like taken a quote unquote risk. Like even right now, I kind of like delay in saying the word risk. But to the outsider, somebody would think it was a risky move. And it's always paid off. I'm not talking about like buying lottery tickets or going to Vegas. I'm just saying like on an interpersonal level of like making a big decision, like moving to a different country, or like, doing a 14-day Vipassana, in some like obscure area, or like, doing a 3-year non-paid internship. Like all those things, I just did it without any, like throwing all caution to the wind, and it's always paid off. And so I've always kind of leaned into that, fortune favors the bold, because at the very least, like the courage that making those leaps gives you is worth more than any amount of money could be in a bank. You know what I'm saying? Like the level of confidence just to be able to do and overcome and whatever, it just comes in leaps and bounds when you have the courage just to do what God has given. Like the way I look at it is my desire set is God's desire set for me, because I'm a
Mhm.
good person. It's not like I'm just trying to do my best for the people I know, and along with just do things that I'm hyper curious in. And I'm like, God gave me the curiosity for X and Y and Z. out of all the billions and trillions of possibilities out there, why did he make me interested in domes? Why did he make me interested in massage? Why did he make me interested in biochar? Like all those things, just I'm like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be interested in. Okay, I'm gonna go for it, and it's always worked out. I have an innate trust with it.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's such a big key to any kind of inner work is to get yourself up into the courage and have that ability to take risks and it's a risk for a reason because you don't know if it's going to pay off. You don't know if things are going to work and play out according to your vision or timeline. And
I'm the opposite of that though. I just did I guess like 2 or 3 podcasts in a row. I'm a process oriented person. Like there's been so many jobs I've done where when the job is done, somebody's trying to remunerate me for my work and I'm almost like oblivious to what I should receive just because the process was the payoff. And so this is what I try and coach into the men that are in my life is like I'm like you have to be process oriented. If you're goal oriented, if you're always like imagining, if you're making an idol out of your vision, that's not the artist way. And I'm mainly an artist. So I'm like the artist way is really to like die to the process and get so wholly immersed that you're in the portal of epiphany. Uranus is just working you and you're just like you're in the cut and you get in the zone. And then when you're in the zone, you do the best that can happen. Like the zone, literally, like all the top performers in the world, no matter what their venue is, they're trying to get into the zone. And they don't get there because they're result oriented. They always get there because some stressor in their local environment relative to their conditioning throws them into a process orientation, a hyper process orientation. And then they just do the best that they could. And then every time a person comes out of the zone, they'll be like, oh my God, I didn't even do that. Like it wasn't even me. It just happened, And that's what I find is like, I think faith is reflected in a hyper process orientation. At least for me, the way I'm wired, I always know when I start to get like result oriented and kind of gravelly, like when I start to strategize and like, ooh, my plan is this and my plan is that. It doesn't ever work out. Like it's not the way God wants me to do things. God wants me to literally be present and go. And when I'm present and go, it's like, have the faith but of a mustard seed and you shall be able to move mountains. It's just like literally however resources, however people, however anything's supposed to come to you will just come to you and you won't know how it's going to come to you. I think a big problem in today's world with data and data acquisition is people think the more data that they get in their life, they think that they can now control the circumstances better with more data. They cannot be further from the truth.
They really couldn't. No, and that becomes like a black hole, empty pursuit that never gets satisfied like an addiction, right? And I think to me, that's the epitome of the controllers, if you want to call it that every little bit of whatever they get, they just need more. There's no satisfaction in it, in the data world. Chance and I did a stream called The Devil's in the Data.
That's such a great title.
Yeah, I was happy with myself.
That's good.
Yeah. And I totally hear what you're saying about the process. And then, so there are people, some might say, 90 or even 95% of the people who won't go into process. They won't get themselves out of their comfort zone. Like if someone comes and asks you to build something you've never built before, there are a lot of people out there would go, oh, I'm not qualified. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I won't be able to get what I need. All of those kind of things that might be more, results oriented. And in the process of taking the risk and getting out of the comfort zone, you bring all your shit up.
Yes.
That was otherwise hidden from you.
Yes.
And you get to see that it's there and make new choices about it. Like, do I want to hold on to that beast that I've identified with that's saying nobody loves me or I'm not good enough or all of those crazy things, or do I want to be in process with God in a creative process and feel the freedom in that? So it's really necessary to become a doer. Now that's not the destination either, but that will, in my mind, it's such a good detox, right? We talk about physical detox a lot, and that's the emotional, spiritual detox, when you just keep on risking that your stuff comes up, that you feel, terrible for a time while it's running, and then choose to let it go.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great way of putting it.
thank you. Um, so since you brought it up, you talked about my desire set is God's desire set for me. Can we go deep into that?
Yeah. So in college, one of the best classes I ever took was like high level statistics. And the cool thing that high level statistics shows is that nothing is random. So when I got into the meditation world and I was really, doing the who am I and like really like becoming introspective and like finding the core of my awareness, um, as awareness, I started to notice that all the quote unquote data sets, like all the desires that my being had, were very specific to the conditioning and the morphology of my body. And so I went to India and I was around a teacher in India. I was around like the first wave of like super sensitive people, like people that were like wanted to be offended by everything. This is like 2003. And I'm not that. I'm very Rajasic, as they would say. I just go, I just do. And I was being browbeaten by a bunch of German women that chose to like, think I was the devil because I was a strong man. And it was really cool because the yogi stood up for me. He was like, "No, Topher is exactly as he should be. He brings the Shiva energy. He has that role. That's his energy. He's the destroyer creator type. Like if you had any sensitivity, you would understand that's what he is." And that kind of set me free. At that age, I still needed an external validation because it was during my first Saturn return and I was in like a very precarious state. But it was like the first time as a young adult man where I was being seen by another adult man that was considered like prestigious in his venue, that like said the way I am is the way I should be. And at that point, I let go of pretending and I just let myself be the fire element. I just let myself be as I am. And from that point on, my life took off. Like then that's when I got into my life's work. I'd already been massaging for about 5 years, but then from that point, I got into the second I found earthworks, always having my hands in the earth. It was brilliant. So, yeah, it's just one of those things. The desire sets that we have, they're not random. They're given to us. And just like people on conversely, like even like when I've been riddled with quote unquote parasites, you know, it became very conscious to me. Like whenever I've done cleanses, I was like, oh my God, my desires for X, Y, and Z aren't mine either. They'll be like, oh, I want that because of this thing in me. And like the ayahuasca world that I was a part of for about 10 years, like when you getting into that level of sensitivity with the plant medicines, that was really wild because the combination of having Vedanta Advaita with like a joy for Christ, and then having the plant medicine world all like kind of working for me at the same time. It was just like, oh, okay. When I have an inborn desire and my morphology matches, meaning it's an appropriate desire, it's supposed to be there. When I have a desire that my awareness becomes aware of, and it doesn't match my morphology and it's causing a discontinuity or a lack of energy in the system, then I know it's not mine. So I gained that level of awareness in my mid 30s, and I've been refining that more and more and more as I go. Because when you touch people for a living, because I do, I do, a lot of times there's a thing called transference. A lot of people will talk about that. And so it became almost a necessity for me to be able to understand what's mine and what isn't mine.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I just have confidence in knowing also because I don't think God sets us up for failure. So like if you have a desire set and you start to follow it, it you'll start to see synchronicities, you'll start to see doors opening for you, you'll start to see all these things occurring that is ushering you forward. That's like what the Hindus and the Buddhists would call your dharma. Like that's sort of like God saying, "Yes, yes, you're understanding the signaling, go." And then there's other things like if you're saying you're being sponsored by some sort of energy that doesn't have your best interests at heart, you'll start to go down that desire set and everything starts to collapse. It's like the field collapses on you. And so I think this holographic, realm that we're in is always signaling us whether or not we are actually, choosing God's desire for us or if we're not. Like it's like instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the only problem people have is that they don't understand the signals that they're getting from their environment. If they understood the signals, and by environment, I mean your internal environment too. Like I'm coming from like your awareness is primary. Whatever your awareness is aware of is secondary. So even what you would call like the voice in your head or voices, depending on who you are or visions, that's secondary to who you are. And so if you cultivate the being aspect of yourself and you can just be and be be primary, like you're just primary, when the agitation, whether it's thoughts or physical things or whatever, comes into your consciousness, you can just go, oh, you can just like, oh yes or X no. Like you can just kind of you can choose is essentially what I'm saying. So I think it's important that people cultivate that awareness. And I have been aware. I don't think everybody's equal in that. I don't think that's a general statement that can be said. I've been around people that have zero, I mean zero awareness that they're aware. Like they're literally just running from thought to thought to thought. They don't know that there's a thinker. They're oblivious to that. So we all have different capabilities in that, and that also has given me a lot of I once again I don't pigeonhole people with that. Like I just get to know people and see how they process the signals, and then I just go from there.
Very nice. I like that. So there's lots in there. I wanted to follow up on when it comes to real versus, you say real God-given desires that are meant for you, and the desires and cravings that you might lose energy to.
Yes.
My acid test for that is letting the desire go. That's
Hmm.
how I see, because you can't let go of what is authentically you.
Right. That's true.
It actually gets stronger when you let it go. So that's how one technique for just seeing what's real and what's not.
That's an awesome statement.
I don't think you. I love it. You said God doesn't set us up for failure. I have my version of it. Everything's rigged in our favor. God
Yes.
wants us to be free and full of life and happy. Um, and so, what do you think about this? This comes up a lot in the spiritual world. Is that if it's not easy, it's not meant for you. And I'm of two minds on this one. So I'm curious what you have to say, because there are warrior moments in life
Hmm.
where you got to build, and it's heavy and it's hard, and like elements maybe are interfering, or whatever metaphors you want to pull in there, and then I'll use the maxim, keep going. But also keep releasing, keep letting go of whatever might be calling in more obstacles. So where do you fall in that spectrum?
I always ask people to be more specific. I would say what's not easy. Like what aspect of this isn't easy?
Nice.
Because there's all these different ways where something could not be easy. Like it could be something where their own slothfulness or their own lack of detail orientation or their own trauma cycles make the process hard. or it could be an actual exertion thing. Like it takes a tremendous amount of energy to move through a blockage, whatever is the perceived blockage. Um, there's so many different. I'm always asking for people to be specific in my life, like with the people I coach, like because there's so many different circumstances. I know you wanted to talk about initiation. To me, initiations are the hardest thing in the world because you're meant to lose. And what I mean by that is an initiation you don't ever survive. Like a real initiation, you don't survive. Like the person you are after a true initiation is never the person you were before the initiation. It's gone. So you, on an egoic level, you've lost. The ego has been obliterated. You've been annihilated. And that's what the Saturn return is. Saturn comes in and like literally takes your youth. That's why he's eating the babies. It's a symbolic thing is he takes the previous 30 years and he devours it. And so Kronos is that archetype in our mind with that. And so real initiations, like I just went through an initiation on Tuesday. That's why I'm a little bit under the weather. We popped up one of our biggest structures that I've ever done with really heavy, heavy metal. So it was like there's 10 guys and we're all working and it was super dangerous and it was cold and wet outside and it was like major stress for like 6 hours. But it was an initiation. So like people are like, oh, it's too bad you're under the weather and whatever. I'm like, no, this is great because that like moved so much energy through my system that all these blockages that I've had, any limitations, like all the different things in my system that might have had doubts, like things I was unconscious of, things in my tissues, the issues in the tissues, there was so much exertion and so much stress, like that was quote unquote hard. That wasn't easy, but it's an initiation because now I'm a different being. Like literally, I'm a different being. Now in the future, I could say, oh, we can do this, this, this. It's like where I'm at in my consciousness now from a confidence level and a knowledge perspective is a totally different thing. So I come from the world of pro athletics. So you're being initiated constantly in pro athletics because no matter how good you've done, you're only as good as your last performance. Like fans are very fickle, so they're always wanting to kill you. Like out of all my adventures in athletics and all my friends that were pro athletes, like how many death threats we all got, it's absurd because fans are fanatical. Fans are literally they're off the rocker. And so there's this thing where you go through the crucible, you go through this incredible level of judgment, and that could be seen to be terribly hard. But the thing about it is, Beth, you survive everything. There's nothing you don't survive. Like this. Like there's nothing that you won't survive. Even when your body passes, you survive that.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
survive it all, and that's the trick. That's the trick of the full archetype of Saturn, of Kronos. He has the scythe, and it's like, oh no, it's horror. Surviving. You survive. There's never a time you don't survive. And so that's the beauty of this existence. Our creator has us primed for success, and even when we're failing because we're not choosing to pick up the signaling correctly, even that will end up being a success on a long enough timeline. We're all destined to go home, all of us.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally, I love that. Initiation. Interesting. It was a big subject in my life, and then it's so warrior as you talk about it. It is really the
Mhm.
quintessential warrior experience, the willingness to go through that death at multiple levels. And I'm well. I guess I'm not a Scorpio according to you, but I've got a fair amount of
Mhm.
friendliness with death. I almost died.
Mhm.
It's getting easier and easier for me to face the actual death, and not to say it's not formidable, but that's where you get yourself to in a place having just seen, like you said, and so one of my new favorite phrases is that freedom accumulates just like toxicity, only
Mm,
better.
nice.
Right? So you prove to yourself over and over the most difficult experience is there you are on the other side. There you
Mhm.
are. And usually, like way more expanded. When I thought I was dying, almost 30 years ago now, and I came out of it like so full of life and in remission, and everything was not what I expected in death.
Yes. Yeah. Only the ripest fruit will fall. I love that saying from Osho. And it's so true because only the ripest fruit will fall. The ego is the only thing that dies. That's it. But you're not the ego because the ego is just your condensed conditioning. It's your identification. And so the thing is, you're not your identification. It's just like a map isn't the terrain. Your identification isn't you. Like it just isn't.
Exactly.
You're the one that's actually aware of the identification, but you're not that. So it's this little trick of the mind. None of us really are taught. At least I mean, where I grew up, we nobody ever talked about the fourth wall and us being the witnessing awareness or any of those types of things. Like that wasn't a common thing to be said. But I had enough early life experiences, traumatic experiences where I was like out of body or like whatever. And it was like, oh, that body is part of me, but it's not all of me. So what? So those quote unquote traumas were a blessing. I could only think it was the same for you.
Well, that's the warrior approach, right? It was an initiation into a brand new experience and a brand new life.
Hmm.
And yeah, lots of trials and tribulations, and many to come after that. Sorry for the sirens.
No
Um,
problem.
yeah, one of the things you said also that you just threw in there, and I caught your stream that I believe it was Chance and Slick Dissident had you and Marty on to talk
Hmm.
about Jesus.
Yes.
And that's been very interesting from my last years. I had a whole like rising up of my Christian roots, and you know, back to the Bible with the law studies, and just reclaiming at some level, going into that world, getting royally disillusioned by everything but Jesus.
Right. Yes, I'm right there with you.
You want to talk
Yes.
about that a little bit? What that is for you? I know maybe there's not that much to say, being
Well,
an internal
Jesus,
experience, but
people have to admit, I'll say, people don't have to do anything. I had to admit to myself at a point in my life that I'm monkey see, monkey do. Like a lot of times I need to have a model to like, benchmark and go after. And Jesus, in my mind's eye, is my benchmark. He's like, oh, if I could be like anything or anyone or anybody, whether he was real or not, it does not matter. The actions and the idea and the whole thing is such that it's like, oh, that's perfection embodied. Monkey see, monkey do. He's my benchmark. I'm just like, oh, okay, I get it. Now, I'm not a person, I don't get wrapped up in the religiosity of things, like thinking somebody could die for my sins or whatever. Um, but there's this very odd holographic thing with Jesus that he kind of transcends because he is perfection. It's almost like eternity dropped in to the temporal. And so it kind of touches every aspect of everything that's in the temporal realm. So I think that's I think that's a way that, at least that's the way I'm interpreting it. And so for me, I've never ever have done anything that he said and had any negative or let's just say whenever I have followed the teachings of Jesus, my life gets super clean. Like clean, clean. Like there's like a haze that's lifted off. And it's almost like the world at that point can't interfere with anything I'm doing. It's like, and I have to say, the first time I read Matthew, it resonated with me so deeply that I kind of knew it to be true. I knew I was in this world, but I wasn't of it.
Mm.
I knew like I had seen so many rich people when I was growing up, and I'd been around so many perverts and like all these like debaucherous type of people, and none of them were happy. Like none of them. Like there wasn't a single one of them that were joyous. And so for me, I was like, well, going down the world route and taking in all that stuff, like that's just they're in hell. Like that's not it. They're all outcome orientation and how much can I gather? Like how many toys can I die with? And or how many people can I consume? How many people can I be a vampire to? That was like the energies that I was exposed to as a child. And so reading Jesus, I think I was 19 when I first started reading him, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like yes. Like I just had this innate like, oh yeah, I and my Father are one. Like, okay, let's go. Like, yes, like this is the authority and the jurisdiction. Like, yes, like it's so clean. It's just clean. And then learning how jurisdiction works, like the king jurisdiction just means kingdom, and learning how that actually works in law is very enlightening. So it's a fun trip for me. I don't know historically what is so. I've been pondering the millennial reign a lot because what we do have on a physical level here doesn't make sense with the storyline that we were given. There's so many amazing buildings that we're told that were built by people that couldn't have built them. And I have a running joke with all my construction friends because it was just like we're all so exhausted with like running our little hobby farms and then like building and doing whatever. And then we're like, hey guys, we have a couple extra hours. Let's go build a courthouse. Like none of us are like, hey, there's only like 10 of us. Let's just go build a male building with, 4 foot thick walls. Like the stories that we're told are just so absurd. So the millennial kingdom stuff makes sense to me in a way because I have been lied to about everything that's important in my life, from a worldly perspective. And biblically it says that Satan will be loosed for a little season, after Jesus' millennial reign. And I've been in these like cathedrals and these other old world buildings that when I walk into them, my consciousness is a Christ consciousness. Like there's no lower order thinking. None. It's all like all the energy goes up into the higher aspects of my being. And I actually build domes. I build things that would be considered like very, very advanced. Like I'm not building cubes. So it's like to me, there is physical in a very weird anecdotal way, there is physical evidence that there was a higher level of consciousness not that long ago. And for certain, we've been lied to about what these people froze in these buildings. Because they say architecture is frozen music. They had virtuoso after virtuoso after virtuoso of completely frozen all over the world and similar looking in a lot of ways. And we're just given the worst stories about how these things showed up and why they were there. So I think that there's some real evidence to Christ was king. I don't think our calendar is accurate. I don't think it's the year 2025. I always had the question in church because I was always brought up as a Protestant. I was brought up that, oh, us poor Christians, we were the ones that were browbeaten and like nobody liked us and we were this or that. And then all of a sudden, everybody decides to take on Anno Domini. And as a little kid, I was like, wait a minute. They took on the Anno Domini distinction while we were like the minority? That makes no sense. There's all these things in the stories in the history that make zero sense. So for me, I'm thinking that there is some physical proof that at least on the very basic level, people had a much higher consciousness not that long ago. I don't think we're evolving. I'm not in that cut of thinking.
Right. Is it possible it's going in both directions, like with that polarity? There's, those that are waking up are waking more up, and those that are sleeping are going more to sleep.
I think there is that. I just don't think the overall amount of energy is available. So
Right.
no matter what, it's God's, it's God's script, right? So we all like get to have our subjective, recall of situations and things like that, and make our own determinations within us. If in looking at the way existence is now, it's very obvious that things are much smaller than they used to be. Like all plants, animals, humans, we're all just smaller. And so that shows me on a very large degree that the amount of energy, it's almost like the terrarium kind of collapsed one
Mhm.
valence. And then let's say in the golden age, that terrarium then goes whoop, and then because in terrariums, the plants and animals and everything grow to the size of the terrarium.
Ah, yes.
So
Yes. Point.
I think right now, I think we're in the collapse phase, which I'm not upset about because if you remember, I have no problem with the Shiva energy. I make biochar. Like I cook things all the way down to the carbon. I have no problem with that. But the other aspect of it is because out of the black, out of the negretto phase of the carbon, then you get this massive expansion. You get all this growth that comes from that. And it's cyclical. Statistically, it's impossible to have an infinite growth model. I don't think God works that way. And it's just
Breathe
like
in,
anything.
breathe
Yeah. It just makes sense. Like we all go through, like you're up there in Canada, you have seasons. It's the way the seasons work. It's just like, okay, we're going into the winter of this time. It's time to concentrate. It's not about having this incredible physical prowess and just dominating the ecosphere. It's about actually finding out who one is, excuse me, unidentifying with whatever you're identifying with, and then letting the thing, condense into its highest energy density and then explode back out into where the higher potentials could actually occur.
Very nice. I love that. Yeah, spiritual growth is not this like
No.
line up, and you've heard me talk, do some shit talking on ascension madness,
Oh, it's terrible.
and yeah, yeah, exactly. This is the natural flow of life, breath in, breath out, and then the expansion around that. If you choose it, right, and being free will, that's not going to happen if we don't choose it. Um, I just wanted to point out, I was listening to one of Marty's streams, and this helped me a lot with making sense out of the Bible, and especially the Old Testament. So I'm a lot more down with the New Testament things that you're talking about. Um, but that Old Testament, the vengeful God, the jealous God, the murderous God, all of this kind of stuff, you can put in place maybe some kings and stuff. But what he said that just is like, of course, was that what you're learning about there is not really about God. You're learning about the author writing about God.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that made a lot of sense how, the projection there. And you had an experience that you described in terms of like not even really having a relationship with Jesus, or whatever name that's a Latin word. I find that name can be problematic, but that you had an experience you totally didn't expect to have, that
Yes.
had a lot of efficacy. Do you want to explain that or describe that?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. It's a double dipper. I was working in like one of these terrible college jobs. Like, my football program would hook me up with summer jobs. And I was working in this plumbing supply center, and I was in the back room. I was in the stock room. And the guy I was working with, his name was Jesus, Jesus. And Jesus was just happy, man. He was just happy dude. And he was like really teeny. He was maybe like 5'2" or 5'3". And he had like a teardrop on the side of his face, like he was an ex-felon, but he was still in his 20s. But the guy was just like, he had the juice. And after a couple of days, I was just like, man, how's this guy happier than me? Because I'm like king dingling at my college. I'm a starting football player. You know, I got the girls, I got like my whole future in front of me, and I'm depressed. You know, I'm living in mammon. And here's little Jesus. Jesus is just like, oh, Gardner this, Gardner that. And so he never pressed the Bible on me or anything. And I started asking him questions, and I started reading passages with him. And he was like, I was so enthralled with his passion. Like he was living it. And he was like, man, my life was horrible. I was in jail. And he just told me his story. And it was like he had a rough life. And when he was in prison, he gave his life to Jesus. And then like he got his time like cut in a third, and he got out and he fell in love with his like, you know, his first love. They had a bunch of kids, like, and he's like, and what really took me was this guy made next to no money. Like he made like relative to living in South Florida, and he would tithe. And I was just like, for a month, I was just like, hey Zeus, dude, why do you tithe, man? You got like little kids, you got this, you got that. And he was like, Gardner, I gotta tell you, like, I don't know what it is. Like, I never want for anything. And I was like, man, like, you can't afford to do that. Like, you can't, like, I was being like the mammon guy, you know? And he finally, like, asked me, he's like, hey, you want to come to our Wednesday night service? And he had asked me a couple weeks, and I was like, no, no. And then finally I gave into it. And I went to the service, and it was in this like little strip mall in Hialeah. Hialeah, for those of you that don't know, is a pretty rough area of South Florida. And this was Hialeah after Hurricane Andrew, so it was like rough. And so I go to this little strip mall. I'm like the only gringo there, and it's all Spanish speaking church. And I go in there, and it wasn't more than like a few minutes being in there. The pastor is like, those of you that want to be saved by Jesus Christ, you raise your hand. And I was just compelled. I like just jumped out of my seat and had my hand up. And like I fully, as he came towards me, it was like the full wave of Christ's presence came through. And I felt like love and forgiveness like I had never experienced. Like all the things that I was just like browbeating myself over. Like endlessly. It was just gone. It was obliterated. It was just whoosh. And then
Amazing.
I gave my life to Jesus at that point. Or I would say now in a more mature way, I gave my life to Christ. Because that's what the Christ energy is. It's the pure throughput line to the creator. And the creator doesn't, he's not, I could see the efficacy in saying that you're going to be judged. You know, I can see the efficacy in that. It's like, so I don't normally talk down on that. But in my life and with all the people I work with, the people that the worst enemy to most people is themselves, including their internal dialogue, just eviscerating themselves. And so the Jesus energy came through me, and it stopped that. It was like literally like no. And I got to feel the full throughput line, and it was incredible. I went back to college, had my best year ever as a player, and then it was just like being beset on all sides by mammon, you know, coming in because it was just like it's just a test I think that a lot of young people have to go through, especially somebody that's in like the limelight, like people that are in that are receiving a lot of attention from their surroundings. And I failed. I didn't do good with all of that. Like I tried to hold the line, um, but I ended up giving in and kind of going wayward with it for a while. But like always, home is always home. It's never not there. And so I eventually, in a very, very weird way, find myself in the middle of the jungle like 15 years later, eh, like having to exorcise a demon out of my neighbor. And all these people that were in the ayahuasca circles were like, if you're ever caught in like this very weird, precarious situation with demonic energy, invoke either the Archangel Michael or Jesus Christ, and that will clear the space. And I was in a very, very weird, unpredictable situation. And this being that was in front of me, he was my neighbor, but the being that was in him wasn't him. This other being was in him. And yeah, I invoked the name of Jesus Christ to clear the area. And this body is only, and I'm not going to say his name, but this is only so and so's body for now and evermore. And I was just like, boom. And the space cleared, and it was just like, I had a secular Jew that was witnessing the whole thing, and then the guy I was working on was a Scientologist. When I say working on it, I don't even mean like it was me doing it, because it wasn't. But it was just like, what are the odds? You know, it sounds like such a odd start to a good joke. Is like, what happens when you have a secular Jew, a Scientologist, and a ayahuasca Christian? You know. But yeah, it worked, and I couldn't deny the power in invoking Jesus Christ. It was like instantaneous. And then I ended up reading a bunch of Michael Heiser's work, and Michael Heiser brought me back into the fold. Because what was so disappointing about the church in my run with the church was they never wanted to go into the supernatural stuff. Which to me, that's like, there's no more supernatural religion out there than Christianity. And like, what, they missed the mark, man. Like if the pastors and the priests and stuff like that would actually go that route, I think their numbers would be much better, and I think the world would be much better off. But yeah, Michael Heiser brought me back in the fold, and I really appreciated him. And I listened to a bunch of other people about spiritual warfare, and I needed that because I was in the world of ayahuasca, which like essentially makes your spirit body semi-permeable, you know, and it makes you aware of it. It's not like it's you cannot not be aware of it. Like, you're aware of the spirit realm and what it's doing, or at least I'll speak for myself. I was. And so yeah, that the only real pillar of light that would ever occur was with Jesus Christ. So there's something on a very functional, real level that is undeniable to me with Jesus Christ. I'm not going to sit here and say I know who he was and I know his history and that I believe the written word of man. But I will say that the efficaciousness of his presence in my life is undeniable.
There you go. That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, and where demonic energy is concerned, it's utterly flawless. I think I've done various practices over my life that made me permeable in the wrong way, and some of the not good things came through me. And in the moments before sleep, this is almost the only time it would ever happen. I will get demonic attacks, and I've learned to very easily release all of my fear and resistance, and poof, it's gone, and I go to sleep. And then I started hearing like Jesus as the demon slayer, and I thought, well, hey, Jesus, could you handle this for me? Some nights like this, and then poof,
Gone.
done.
Yeah.
Right. And when you say the word jurisdiction, that is exactly what I always evoke. This is the jurisdiction of Jesus Christ. And now what are you guys doing? What's going to happen next? Nothing. Gone. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a thing. Like, I can't explain it. I can't describe it. I don't know the history. I don't know how to sort through all the mess of the words and the fighting and conflict and everything like that. But it's 100% reliable. The Spirit of Christ.
It is. It is. In situations too where you would like, if you would go down the route of saying, hey, we are the placebo, it's all us and whatever, I can tell you with a ton of doubt in my heart on multiple times, It wasn't like it was like I am creating this situation me. No. Not at all. It was literally like, oh, this is it. This is like it is it's so powerful to me, Beth. It's the most humbling thing in the world. Like it is real power humbles. And
Amen.
and it humbles me like no other.
That's beautiful. That's a sign that it's real. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got it. I love that. Real power humbles. There's so many good sound bites coming out of here. Um, yeah, interesting. I want to go back just because I was hearing something you said, because you were talking about how love is understanding, and
It's
then
wanting to understand. It's a
wanting.
difference.
Mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
different because wanting. You know who taught me this, by the way?
Ooh,
Ayn Rand, of all
nice.
people. So I was listening to her being interviewed by Mike Wallace in like 1954, and it was so funny because Mike Wallace was kind of grilling her. Even back then, they had this like globalist agenda thing going on. And he's like kind of like being sort of condescending to her, you know, as being this Russian immigrant writing about the strong American ideals and all this stuff. And he's like, you know, your detractors, your critics say that your ultra pro-American ideals are insensitive and that you play favorites. And Ayn Rand is like, Mike, are you married? And he's like, yes, happily. And when you go home, Mike, do you go and tell your wife that she's just as good as all the other women in your life and that they're all equal in your eyes and you're just choosing to be with her out of convenience? She
I hope not.
stopped him dead in his tracks. What love is wanting to know what that person is. It's there's an internal want. Like I want to know what my wife Mackenzie, how she sees things. Because when you want something, God is always listening. God's like, "Oh, you want this? Oh, blah, blah, blah." And when you want to know how another person sees, it makes them bloom. Because so much of their life, other people's lives, they've been told how to think. They've been told that they should be this way or that way. But that's not what you're doing. You're wanting to experience them as they experience the world. And that like infuses them with energy. And I've always said this, I've seen this with thousands of couples now. When there's love, there's enough energy. When there's not love, there's not enough energy. It's just that simple.
Yep, I'm loving that. So a little bit of a parallel with Lester Levinson, who's a lot of my work is based in, not very well known. And so he teaches people, he taught people, he's passed now, to want freedom more than anything. And to me, wanting to understand is similar in that,
Mhm.
because what is the very, energy draining inversion of wanting to understand is wanting to figure it out. Right. So you see someone with some kind of behavior that makes no sense to you. Maybe it's destructive, maybe it's like harmful to you or the other. And then the gears start to turn and you want to figure them out and you want to know what their problem is and you want to, pigeonhole them and call them a this or call them a that and call it a day. And you got nothing except a huge drain of your own life force in that, right? That's how people try to solve all of their problems. They run the gears and we're trained to be in our intellect 100% of the time trying to figure out the problem, and all we get is exhausted. You might get some answers, but not with any satisfaction because you're practically lifeless when you're full on doing that. But the wanting to understand what you said, the key is to actually see from their perspective. And that is, to me, godlike, right? Why would God create so many perspectives, like you were saying earlier, but so to experience
Mhm.
the self through that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so amazing because I've been in lust. I'll just admit it. I've been in lust. And that was probably my biggest faux pas in my life until age 40. when I became aware that lust was driving me. I wanted to love the women that I lusted after. But wanting to love somebody isn't the same thing as love. And when I finally found that little tripwire in my being, I was like, I actually don't love these women that I lust after. I don't love them. I want to love them. And so then this is getting back to your question, if it's easy, it's right. Like if it's easy, it's the way. That's the one venue that I really think is true. Let's say you slay the lust demon within yourself, and this is more prevalent for men than it is for women. Let's say at least you're conscious of the lust, the lust aspect of yourself, and you come across a woman. The love between you and the woman creates such an incredible loop current that it is easy. It's not hard. And I wish somebody would have told me that as a young man, like growing up in the 80s and 90s. Like all of my love archetypes and relationship archetypes were either codependent, super dramatic, and really hard. So that's the way I was conditioned. I didn't know any better. And most of those relationships weren't love based. They were like, from the man's perspective, it's exactly what I told you I exercised was I lusted after a woman for a short time and I wanted to love her, but I didn't actually love her. And so, and getting into the loop current, and like when you actually meet a being that you can love and it's real love, it is easy because there's so much energy in the loop current. It's just it ends up running itself. I wrote this whole treatise on it, and I was like, where there's a true two, there's a three. And the reason that is the third thing is like the direction that the parallel paths then start to converge and go down to the horizon, which is the heart. Like that's the path. And it's like it's this beautiful thing. I'm sort of a late starter. It took me about 40 years to figure that out, but I'm glad that I did because earlier in my life, I was running. I really wanted to love these women. Like I wanted to, but I didn't. And I find I've only had two real loves in my life. And with both of those women, my first love and now my wife, I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Like I can't wait to understand where she's coming from. Like I'm looking forward to it. And then that parlays into all the physical stuff and all the rest of it, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a very sad reality that we think we need lust to initiate a relationship of some kind, but it's the biggest block to that because lust is not love. And you almost always figure that out by receiving somebody's lust
Right.
and feeling I'll use an extreme word, the violence of that, actually.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I've done a very deep dive, starting to recognize that in myself. I don't know, a while ago, and I just went for broke, like to a point where it's not a problem for me anymore. And yeah, it's just such a good heavy energy to let go of. I appreciate that very much. Where was it? Let's see where we're at here in our topics. What do you consider, or yeah, we didn't talk about, well, we talked about free will. So if there's anything more there, but what about spiritual trustafarians? What's that to you?
Yeah, I came across a bunch of people that were essentially didn't have to work in my life. Like where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, there was a lot of wealth. And then also where I moved to in Costa Rica, there was a lot of wealth. In fact, everywhere I've been, there's wealth. You know, wherever you go, there you can find wealth. But I ended up working for a lot of people. Being a masseuse, you end up working for very, very, well, I should say this. Like, I would say the people have discretionary income at the very least. In my line of work, I've built for people that were very wealthy, and I have also worked on like massage people that were very wealthy. And there was a subsect of these people that we would call trustafarians because they would act all like trustafari, which is like a thing that they say in the Caribbean, is like they would be like, ah, oh, trust God, trust Jah, da 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 da. But they've never had to like lift a finger in their life. Like they've never actually have done anything in their life. And so they're actually stuck in a very adolescent phase in their
Yes.
consciousness. It's all pleasure seeking.
Right.
And these pleasure seeking people are really funny to be around because they don't have the wherewithal to understand how stuck they are. It's I start calling them spiritual trustafari because they'd be the first people to tell you about, oh, just let go, just and it's just like you've literally there's nothing that you've had to do, like you don't do anything, you don't, there's no initiation that you've ever gone through. And they all started to congregate in my area of Costa Rica because it was like a beautiful tropical area. You know, I hear the same thing goes on in Bali, and they all have wealth one way or another. And it's just really funny because they all, to the one of them, think they're enlightened. But I've never met enlightened people that get offended so fast.
Right.
In my conditioning, it was really funny because I remember when I was being trained to be a Raja Yogi and everything. I remember I asked the guru, I was like, how do you know you're enlightened? And he goes, you can't be offended. And I was like, whoa, that's really incredible. And he's like, and you can't even be offended by your own thoughts. I was like, whoa, that's so practical. That's just like, there's no jibber jabber in that. It's just like, whoomp. And this guy was clean. Like he was running a ton of energy. Like he didn't claim to be enlightened, but he was at least in my time around him vibing. And so you'd be around all these trustafarians, and they were just like, oh, you know, in their infinity pool, looking at the ocean, just talking, blessing up God, left, right, and center. And then like the internet would go out, and they were all like pulling their hair out. And it was hilarious because I was just like, oh my goodness, these people are like they're so blind because they've been so, I didn't even see them as being blessed. You know, they had lots of material stuff, but their lack of self-awareness was very, very prevalent in my consciousness.
Right. Yeah. Great awareness. Because when you get, it's one of the, what can be a trap. You know, the Bible says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a wealthy person. Now, but that might be all twisted around too. But, and one of my trainers was working with billionaires at a time who were like, you know, one guy buying and selling yachts. I just remember a story that he told. And no, regardless of him being like always anxious and always uptight and always on edge, and it was his wife that says, you need some help. But because he had all of this wealth and could, you know, on one phone call make $1 billion deal, then he could not bring up his hard feelings, especially the fear of dying, which is like the core of all the bad feelings that we
Yeah.
could have. And so he just couldn't feel it because he had this security. He had that security there, and so he couldn't free himself because of the wealth. Now, I don't think it's 100% locked in there. I believe you could, just with the right intention of knowing, okay, I'm here to go free, or I'm here to know that I'm free. You know, use your other things to bring up. I've one coach. She said she was going to go skydiving to bring up her fear of dying, because it was so, you know, so much of it had been like, oh, she couldn't find any other bad circumstances. But yeah, when you've got that life that you never had to lift a finger or suffer for anything, then it creates that kind of spiritual arrogance and just like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're suffering until the internet goes out and you're losing your shit over that. So it's it can be. There's we have such an interesting relationship with wealth because we're in slave society and the only animal that has to pay to live, to survive. But even that, right? That it's what do you think of that? Maybe I'll pass it to you.
I don't believe in that at all.
Nice.
There's only one provider. I don't like, and wealth isn't money, you know? So, um, I understand that I will be provided for in all ways, always. That's just as it is. Because even I've been there. I've been there where I literally did not have a thing as an adult, and it was an initiation. And guess what? My life was awesome. Like I lived 3 years not using money, just doing barter, and it was awesome. Like, so I learned how to build houses out of dirt. Like, I can literally like go outside and like, oh, okay, it's time to make a mud hut. Like for me, it's just one of those things. Is I think one of the biggest illusions in the world is that money or currency or whatever is the storage of wealth. Like you'll hear like crypto people talking about that. Like this is a storage of wealth. Couldn't be further from the truth. If you're putting your wealth into digits, good luck. Have fun with that. Because that's not true. That's literally not true. Like that is not how many ever digits and commas you have on a ledger in some sort of, virtual space. That is not wealth. Wealth is knowing that the provider provides. That's it.
Yeah. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And so what was your experience in ashrams? Let me know if you have a hard stop of any kind. By the way, I forgot to ask you, so you can either private message me or just let me know if you've got a time limit. But do you want to talk about what you noticed in ashrams? Where were you in those ashrams? And
Yeah, sure. I'm just making sure my phone is plugged in. I thought it was plugged in. Let's see here. She's become finicky, this old phone of mine. Are we charging? I was just told I had 10% left.
Okay. So if you
No,
off,
I
we know
think
now.
it's plugged in. I don't understand. It's just being finicky. That makes no sense. Yeah, I joined an ashram when I was in my mid-20s, as like most idealist 20-year-olds do. And it was mainly because I was in the yogic path, and I'm sort of like a quality over quantity person. I really wanted to get to the spiritual depths of my yoga practice, and this whole fourth wall thing was very intriguing to me. So yeah, I entered an ashram. I gave all my property to it and lived that life for a few years, and it was enlightening in its own way. It showed me like how to actually deal with narcissists, like how to actually let's just say the guru was a self-admitted sociopath. Like he was a sociopath. And so in that, I got a very, very good training in sociopathy and a very good training in how to survive sociopathy. Now that was just my particular experience. I'm not saying all ashrams are like that, but that was mine. And it was great. It like pushed me out the door. And so after my Saturn return, I got to be my own man. And it was perfect. So yeah, it was one of those things I needed to go through. Obviously, I had many, many daddy wounds. So the male guru was like the surrogate father archetype for me. And my dad was a narcissist, so he fit the bill just perfect.
Right. Yeah. Is that what they're capitalizing on there, knowingly or unknowingly? That the daddy wounds. Is that we can talk
Oh
about that
yeah,
next.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, they
Yeah.
know it. They like that's when I really started to break away from the ashram. Was he started to call all of us that were like the sannyasins, the people that were actually in the ashram, he started to call us his children. And I was like,
Mhm.
and then he was asking me to do things that I didn't have any calling to do at all. And so I wouldn't. And then he tried to pull me aside because I was like a really good recruiter. Like when I believe in something, I can sell it. And I was bringing lots of people into the ashram, and he saw it as like, oh no, like my number one recruiter is like kind of not listening to me. And then I read the book, The Murder of Christ from Wilhelm Reich. And in that book, he details how we create messiahs to we will create a false messiah out of this like wound that we have with one of our parental figures, and we create the messiah to actually murder them. And I went into the guru's room crying, and I told him, I was like, I'm sorry I did this to you. Like I did not mean to make you this exalted being. Like that wasn't my intention. And it wasn't more than a few weeks after that that the ashram completely dissolved.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because he had a psychotic break. Like I think what happened to him was is that I'm not going to speak for him, but just on an operations level, like when let's say you have an organization and your number two person that like is generating and organizing everything, they say they're no longer in it. That could be very disheartening for the business.
Exactly. Yeah. If people are already taking your lead and they notice that you're disillusioned by the process, then yeah, very, very similar. Is there a guru experience out there? About nearly a decade into it, I'd been there maybe 8 times by that point, and then the news comes out that he's a pedophile and stealing everybody's money, and maybe a couple of murders in the mix. Hard to prove, but it was the beginning of a very powerful disillusionment, and that's why one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. We can go in a lot of different directions here, but how disillusionment and sacred calling intersect. Like, is
Yes,
it right? Is disillusionment a completely necessary ingredient in any kind of spiritual evolution?
it was for me. Because you only get disillusioned with an idol. Like you said, if it's real, like if it's the real thing, if it's the truth, you can let it go, and it will get stronger. It will be more there. We get disillusioned with what we identify with, like the idols that we make. And so disillusionment has to happen. In fact, me as a leader of an organization and of men, like a lot of times I will intentionally create disillusionment with people so that they don't idolize me. Because I'm very, very sensitive to when the codependent thing starts to happen and people start to think of me as like a daddy or whatever. I hate it. Like energetically, what that feels like. I'm only a daddy to one little girl. That's it. I'm not a daddy to men. And so I will intentionally create situations to make sure that that border, that barrier is up. Because people by default, the majority of people by default want that codependency. They want that, and that's just not my bag anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful thing. That back to Lester Levinson, I've got him on my mind because I've been listening to a whole bunch of talks and stuff like that. And one of his biggest things that happened after he had his awakening, whatever that is, I can't project exactly, but um, I mean, I have thought a lot about it. He didn't want people to depend on him because then they wanted to be around him. They wanted to flock around. They felt good when they were with him. They didn't feel good when they weren't with him. And whereas, this guru in India that I was studying, he might have given lip service to that he didn't want people to depend on him, but it was actually all of the actions were all about drawing you in and keeping you in. And, you needed this medicine. He would make sure couples didn't live together or have, the kind of closeness that might be natural in a family unit, because that way he could always be the daddy, is what I'm putting together now.
Yeah.
Right? He could always be that strong father figure or even husband figure. Sadly, that many, many women fell for that. But yeah, it's disillusionment became my best friend. I was just searching around. I have a song called Dear Disillusionment.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like the pain of I'm gonna try to find a link here for people just to listen. It there's no greater pain than disillusionment, right? Like it's a death. You have died in a
It
way
is.
to some form of your own projection, and it's not like a party. You don't jump up and down, woo. But nonetheless, it is the biggest gift when those scales fall from your eyes and you see that the person you projected, right? It's a different level of identification. It's easy to see I'm identified with myself and my thoughts and my feelings and my body. See, it's all my. But we don't know it identification when we've put it on the other. And this is one of my epiphanies the other day, that you and I are the same, right? Like the projection of you is the same as the projection of I. It's that like dislocation of
Yeah.
our true identity, and it's identical at the signature vibration of it. So yeah. Anyway, I think I found the album here. I'll just share the album. It's not letting me copy the song itself, but you can find the song Dear Disillusionment on this record here.
Are you
And
are you are you a musical artist?
yes, I am. Yeah, I haven't been spending a lot of time with it these days. A little bit. It's always my late night. Like all of a sudden, some song is erupting out of me, and then I put it in my phone and I forget about it and don't go back to it. But yeah, it's been a big part of my life. I have 4 recordings that I've done. So you can find them all
Uh,
on Spotify or iTunes or anywhere.
Oh, wonderful. I'll have to give a listen.
Yeah, heavily influenced by my time in India and lots of mantras and Sanskrit and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm,
Uh-huh.
I'm super de-identified with it right now. I don't know if that's going to come back or if I don't need identification to do it, but we'll see if the calling is there. My spirit, my creative energy goes in so many different directions these
Mhm.
days. Yeah, yeah. So let's see that. How do you see it, say, from the celestial perspective, moving out of the guru phase and into some new place, and what does that look like for you?
I am not really clear on that question. When you say from the celestial phase, what do you mean?
I was going to say astrological, but you don't like that word, so I,
Oh, for me, like when my Saturn return came, like the Saturn return at the end of the cycle, there's a culmination point where it's almost like a mini life review. So it starts around 28 and a half and it ends at 30 and a half. And
right,
conversely, like,
just like the ages, or is it true we're moving into the age of Aquarius? That's what people say, and that's like one of the
well, we're
hallmarks. Mm.
so my understanding of when ages change is at the spring equinox, wherever the sun rises on the spring equinox, when you have equal day and equal night, wherever that rises, whatever constellation that's in front of, that's your that's the age. Given that we're going to be in the age of Pisces for about another 200 years. But ages last a very long time because Pisces is a very big constellation. So I do constellational astrology. I don't do tropical. Tropical makes every sign 30 degrees in the sky. It disconnects it from the constellations. I see it differently. I like to have a marker. And so, yeah, the sun's going to be rising in front of Pisces for another 200 years, give or take a couple of years. And given that we're in the age of Pisces for quite a long time, because Pisces takes up like 35, 36 degrees in the sky. It's a big constellation. Just like Virgo. Like Virgo takes up 41 degrees in the sky. She's huge. And like Scorpios are like really, really small. So we're in Pisces for quite a long while. But the thing is whenever God is very gentle with us, so like whenever we're transitioning, like say the age of Pisces lasts a few thousand years. If you have a couple hundred years where you start to feel the ebb and flow of Aquarius, that's to be expected. You know, what like Aquarius is denoted by very, very calculated, quick energy. It's always future oriented. It's very electric, and people are still really mushy. You see lots of Pisces overtones with people. You see like a murkiness and a confusion. That's very Piscean. The people in your life that have dominant Aquarius energy, they're very clear. They're like, they're clear. Their minds are very fast and they're clear. That's not the dominant energy I see right now. So I would surmise that we're going to be in Pisces for a while, you know, because the Jesus archetypes are still so strong. You know, Jesus is like, you know, you see like the Vesica Pisces on a lot of Christian iconography. So I think that's still going to be around for quite a while.
Right, and it's kind of like when winter rolls in here, and you know, it's not just like, although we can get this one day it's summer, one day it's winter. It's not really like that. There's there's a slow ebb and a movement, and oh, there's some signs of winter coming, and the slow turn and the up and the down of temperatures and that kind of thing. So I'm assuming it's the same in the turn of the ages. Right, exactly. And so how does that be the cause of moving out of a more guru mentality where we're looking for the daddy figure and vulnerable to those, not good gurus, and then moving into clarity, being, would you call that following yourself or following Christ or following nature? What would you describe as the contrast there?
Well, we're going to go from being really emotional because Pisces energy is emotional. It's ruled by water. And we have so many water themes in our life right now to where it's going to be much more of an intellectual age when Aquarius comes in. Because Aquarius is much more about the air and electricity because air rules electricity. So we're still very mushy people. Like people get bent out of shape so easily. The Aquarian isn't like that. The Aquarian is like very cold and calculated. Like you think about it, the Aquarian energy is the end of winter. You know, you have Capricorn and Aquarius are like the coldest times of the year. And so you have that in their pragmatism. Like if you've ever been around like a ultra pragmatic person, like a German engineer, they're not trying to be cold. It's just that they're so pragmatic and so focused that the emotion means nothing to them. That's sort of the Aquarian energy. And the Aquarian, because it's dominated by its mind so much, even if it does start to feel things, it starts to think about its feelings before it can feel it. So that's, I was married to an Aquarian and I almost married another one. And it was really funny because she was always asking me how she felt.
Ah,
And I
right.
was like, you tell me, you're the one feeling it. Like, and to this day, we're still friends. Like, it's just like, we have like a bi-yearly conversation. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? Da, da, da. And she's like, how should I feel? I'm like, oh my God, this Aquarian archetype is so strong in you. Um, and so, yeah, the Aquarians are very, very bright. They usually put themselves in good situations because they have enough like savviness and future orientation to kind of know what a loser is and what a winner is. But my goodness, they're kind of emotionally bereft. The like the best way you could think of Pisces is like a telenovela. Everybody's dramatic and like overdoing things and like, it's the end of the cycle. So everything's just kind of like mushy together type of thing. So I don't see that ending anytime soon. Like unless like, some crazy AI thing comes down and we all become the Borg. I see the Pisces thing still having legs for a while.
Right, right. Interesting. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out there's that, say, spiritualism, like get out of your head and into your heart. When in reality, we're already pretty mushy, like you said, when it comes to the emotions. But most people are trained to suppress all that mushiness and the emotions so they don't actually feel it because it's all a disturbance. It's all pain. And then they'll criticize, well, don't be in your intellect, don't think things through. How
I
convenient.
I actually don't think people are taught to be pragmatic at all. Like at least in the United States, like the social engineering was very much to make people adolescent. And
Exactly.
what makes you an adolescent is that you're hyper emotional.
Exactly.
And so in other countries I lived in, that they don't the young people don't have the hyper emotionality that North Americans have.
Right. And
North, go ahead.
the daily consumption of media that's there to evoke the emotions, right? Like that was Disney's big discovery, that they could make a cartoon that made you cry.
Right.
And he just totally capitalizing on our mushiness. Yeah.
Yeah, with Aquarius, it's not like even when the Aquarius feels emotion, they instantly start analyzing it. It's pulled into their head. It's hilarious.
Right. 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 Oh,
Yeah.
that would make another good stream, just to focus on how each sign deals with their emotional body kind of thing. But maybe not for
Yeah.
today. Yeah, we're here almost 2 hours, and I've got a couple of more questions if you want.
Yeah, go
We,
for it.
yeah, we did talk if there's anything more you wanted to say about Saturn return, but you said quite a bit. And would you want? Here's the good one. What does vibration is location mean? That's our
So
last topic.
the like so this is a tenet in scalar physics. People will call that radionics, scalar physics. It's essentially it's the physics that they took out of I guess education about 100 years ago, or at least with common education. This is another way of saying it's ether physics. So in ether physics, ether isn't a particle. It's not like I did a podcast with Tom Cowan and I called him the particleist because he's so funny because he's like, show me the proof. Show me the atom, show me the DNA, show me the bacteria, show me the virus, like show it to me. Like I want to see it. So we've never seen it and you say it's there, I'm just to trust you, like that type of thing. I love that about him. Ether is the medium. It's essentially the transition zone from the causal plane to the material plane. So a lot of people will say it's plasma. I think it's before plasma. I think plasma is the first phase of matter. In fact, out of the plasmas, like if you're going to make plasma in a lab, they essentially make plasmas out of hydrogen, and hydrogen is the lightest element. So that makes sense that that's the first thing of light to condense. So I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
Yeah, vibration is location. So you
Okay,
talked
vibration is location.
about,
So
yep.
what occurs is in scalar physics in radionics, we are drawn to places that we resonate with. This is Viktor Grebevnikov called this cavity structure effect or structured cavity effect. I've heard people say it both ways. That's scalar physics. So your body has a morphology. Your mind has a morphology, means it has a geometry. That geometry fits in another geometry like that. And it won't fit in other geometries. If you were to reduce that geometry, that four-dimensional geometry down to a two-dimensional waveform, that's a frequency. that frequency is where you end up being. So all of us have experienced, like when we go into a place that matches our morphology, both mentally and physically, I'm at home, I'm here, and you can rest and you're in it. Or even if you're in your home and like say your home's a mess for whatever reason, your internal frequency is discordant because your space is discordant, you know? And so we're always trying to reach peace and harmony, right? And so that peace and harmony, like that peace and harmony pulls us to areas where our geometries can match that space or match that person. And because in nature, it's very obvious that there's biomimicry, you know? There's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, but they're not exact copies. They're kind of a little bit different, a little bit different, a little bit different. And if you can kind of fit yourself into something that you fit in, that's where you're supposed to be. It's just that simple. It's like, it's so, and that's why Viktor Grebevnikov called it, he called it cavity structure effect. And that was like, from his perspective, that was animals can know where to migrate to. They'll know where to go to create their home just because the cavity, the negative space of something is what drew them to it. And when I first was reading his thesis, that really resonated with me because that goes back to like the whole Hermetic principle of cavitation and that nature pulls, she doesn't push. And so it's like, the way I look at it, it's like the eschaton, you know, like we're all pulled to our spiritual final destination, right? And we're being led by our nose, thinking that we're doing it. And you get put there, and it's just like, I fit, I'm home. That's my resonant pattern. And you can always tell when people don't read their signaling, because, you know, God did give us free will. And if you're not reading the signaling correctly and you don't trust, you'll be put in situations where the body and the like all of it's just discordant, and that's usually when you see huge abuse patterns starting to occur.
Right. Wow. That's download right there.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure what more to ask about that, but yeah, the feeling of home. I think that's why they can trick a lot of people into the sense that this isn't home on Earth, that we're always longing for a home. And to me, one way I describe home is sacred purpose, synonymous with freedom, synonymous with love, true love, not a love that has an opposite. And then there are your people that resonate with you, right? So we have the House of Free Will, and we get together now actually twice a week. I've added a satsang Sunday onto that, and there's enough, you could say, in common, in values, in our perspective, that we can intersect without a whole lot of discord. Doesn't mean we're identical by any stretch of the imagination or agree on everything, but in the discussions, it always expands into greater expansion. It's another way to say that. Yeah, yeah. And so there's a home feeling to it. And it's like home for me, but it's not going to be home for somebody else. They're going to come in and go like, why are all the weirdos here? Something that's like me. And yeah, so that's beautiful. Vibration is location.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a tenet. And it's like women know this better, right? Men are kind of, because we're the positive pole, we're meant to push. But if any heterosexual man is honest about it, he's only pushing as far as he can to please the woman that's pulling. That's just the truth of the matter. Like if you were to take women out of the equation for men, we wouldn't do anything. Men do all this work in the world to somehow, some way provide and please their women.
Right.
I know that sounds I know that's an alien concept for a lot of people, but it's literally the truth. And I'm talking about healthy heterosexual men. The discussion I have with all the men in my life that are healthy and heterosexual, 90% of our conversation is what are we doing for our women? Like what we're about to do, what we're planning, how we're going to accomplish X, Y, and Z so our women can have what they want, or that they can be supplied the nest that they need, or however it goes. And, I had a good talk with Kelly Brogan about that. And, she's come full circle, as you probably know, like with her feminist thing. But it's just like, I remember when I first met my wife, she was indoctrinated to think that men weren't like that. And I was like, no, you've been around boys. You've been around like very immature, wounded people. I have 5 really good friends that you're going to meet, and we're all the same. And now I have more than that that are like, we're always, I'm not saying we're codependent and we do everything for a woman. I'm just saying like the primary motive force for work is to provide for our families. Like that's our role. We're here to provide and protect. And that's just the way we're wired. It's not that we're trying to be or somebody like conditioned us that way or anything like that. It's not like that at all. So it's a beautiful thing. And the woman creates the environment. She creates the mood, the setting to induce, to pull in and to attract what it is that she wants. That's the feminine negative side. That's scalar physics. That's frequency is location. It's much more of a feminine thing. The man is just pushing because he's being attracted to the great attractor of what his wife and his kids need. But it's really the woman's needs. Like if I figured this out in construction a long time ago, not even to talk to the man about what he wants because it's not important. If he's coupled with a woman, it literally all comes down to her and what her needs are. Like,
Right.
because the man doesn't care. This is the funniest thing that I try to teach my women clients is like men really don't give a shit. Like men could have a lazy boy and a big screen TV or have their books, whatever way they consume media, and they're good.
Right.
Men don't care. It's the women in their life that care about all this stuff, and so the man is motivated to give them what they want.
Right, right. Yeah, I learned a while ago. I think I read a book or heard a talk or something just about how different it was to, say, in the field of marketing advertising, how different it was to market to a woman compared to a man, like night and day, and because the vast majority of decisions in a home end up made by the woman. Why? Because she has the preferences.
Yes.
Right? The man doesn't really have the preferences
No.
at all. So then, yeah, that little tweak of learning to actually reach and speak to the woman was an epiphany for this author, and I could very much see it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that way in every venue.
Right.
And so I was really lucky that I had all my years of massage where the majority of my clients were women. So I actually had like a really good rapport with speaking with women in a very healthy way. So when I started building and there was like these big investments, I had no problem in listening to women and what they needed.
That's
And
amazing.
that helped me with my construction career a ton.
Yes, no doubt it did. Do you want to respond to this comment as we prepare to start wrapping up for today? He said the man is supposed to lead the woman as she pushes him to do better. Trying to make a woman happy leads to
the
discontent.
leading. That's the thing is most men, I'm sorry, I don't think a lot of men can lead. Like, I mean, that's such a general statement. Like, I'm just talking about the energetics of it. I'm not talking about the actual, like, the verbiage that goes on between two people. The energetics of it is, yeah, the man might have like the vision and see the horizon and all that, but a lot of men aren't leaders. They're just not.
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at the masculine, the masculine and feminine archetype, how they work together, I had to conclude they're not 2 archetypes. They're 1 archetype, but that they've got this flow of energies, maybe in one direction. And so it blurs a lot. Now, a man with a very strong purpose and knows themselves and has a trajectory in life, that's very attractive. Like that's something that it's very easy to love a man that's full of his own purpose and easy to support a man in that as well. because, in my feminist days, now I want to talk to Kelly Brogan. Maybe I'll get you to introduce me. There was always the sense like, oh, one day I'll have a man in my life who will support me in my purpose. And it was really a wrong pursuit.
Mhm.
I know that
Yeah.
now. And I did get a man who supported me on my purpose, and it didn't really work. It didn't work at all, in fact. So it's turning the tables on that natural flow between the masculine and feminine. But so yeah, I can see truth on both sides there.
My favorite thing in this world is the male-female dynamic.
Mm,
I love it beyond belief because energetically it is night and day on the table. So what you learn in Ayurvedic massage is you're always in a circuit with whoever you're around. Like right now, you and I have a mental circuit, and we have this really good reciprocal loop current that's going on. We resonate, right? So we have a building of energy. When you're laying hands on somebody and you're working with them, you can see what aspects of them in their circuit have resistance because resistance produces heat. You can see heat and density. You can see what aspects, because you're hitting with different, polarities of your fingers, and different parts of the body have different polarities. So you're just running essentially a diagnostic and seeing, oh, okay, they're holding here, here they're completely open, da 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 da. The female apparatus, the female body as a whole, if it's heterosexual, the whole thing's collapsing to the dantian. Like the whole energetic field, I can always feel it's behind me and it's collapsing towards their center. Especially if they're within the years of production, like of reproduction. Like that energy, the field is collapsing because their physiology is the negative polarity. It's the core negative polarity. And negative just means attraction. Everything's attracted to the center of it. And then the male energy is the positive polarity. So it's pushing out. It's like it's going out and doing that. And it's just home. It's like the yin yang sign. It's just so perfect. The one wants the other within it, and the other wants to be in the other. And it's just this perfect mixture. And they do become one if you zoom out. They don't become one. It's like one of the most beautiful things in the world is to see a healthy relationship because you see the black and the white, but then you see the dot within them and you see their interplay. You see the energy moving amongst them. And it's a beautiful dynamic to watch. And I've had enough clients that were identified as homosexual, identified as trans, and I felt the differences in their bodies. Like I felt the different energetics in their bodies before they would even tell me with some of them. So that's a very interesting thing to see is like, okay, if the male, the healthy heterosexual male is this positive energy that's pushing out, a lot of times when there's a decision or whenever there's a trauma or whatever that causes that loop current to fall in on itself, it presents as the negative polarity. And the vice versa in women that have that go on. It's a really amazing thing.
yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's yeah, one of my favorite all-time subjects. I was just fantasizing maybe we could get you in the House of Free Will for a workshop on the masculine feminine. Such an amazing topic.
It's my favorite thing. I love it. I did a series with Tom Barnett. I think we did three that were very, very well received, like three different aspects of it. And yeah, it's awesome. Because even
And
now, like when you build for a couple, you will see every range of those beings because of the investment.
ah, very,
It's
very
like there's skin in the game, right? So I
right.
went from like very minor stakes with like, somebody pays me $100 for a massage or whatever, that's one thing.
Right.
So paying you a few $100,000 to build for them, that's a whole nother thing. And so that level of like attunement of being like, oh, 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 okay. And then learning the dynamic between the couple, that's been very, very eye-opening for me.
Nice, good practical experience.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure and send people to your YouTube channel. I thought I had the link right here, but I don't. It's
It's
just
at it's at BioCharisma on YouTube.
at
Like
BioCharisma.
yeah, all my podcasts is BioCharisma. I'm BioCharisma on Telegram. I'm BioCharisma on
Oh,
Rumble, YouTube, all that stuff. On Spotify, if you guys like the auditory stuff, I'm Spotify, Apple. It's all the BioCharisma podcast.
nice. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you can also find him at Topher HQ headquarters there. With all
Yeah.
roads lead from there. Topher
Yes.
has a Patreon account as well. So I'm
No,
going
I
to
don't.
You
I
don't?
don't have.
Okay, that's old then. Okay, I've just picked that up from your website. Okay, good to know.
No, I have
And
a buy me a coffee and a PayPal. I think on my website, because the Topher HQ, the reason why I went with that is because I have 4 businesses, and so it's sort of like it funnels. Like I have my media there, I have my building there, I have my massage there, so people can donate at topherhq.com if you're into it. But I am starting, like I'm building new websites for next year, so it's all going to transition to BioCharisma TV will be all the media stuff, and Coral Domes will be all the building stuff.
beautiful. You'll become a split personality.
Exactly.
Yeah. I always recommend one site as a business coach. I always recommend one site. I think it's fantastic to go and just see, like, wow, look at the breadth of experience and knowledge that you have. Do as you like. I know it can be hardship. So, is there anything else you want to share with us before we close for today? So appreciate everything that we talked about.
No, I feel really complete with our conversation. You're always such a wonderful host, and it's so nice to spend some time with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. It's been a pleasure. I had you on my radar, and then you responded right away. So fantastic. Really good.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. So I'll just share a couple of things. Like I mentioned, Don Lester is on Monday talking about medically assisted dying, the whole death and dying subject. You can do an archetype reading at my website in 10 minutes. Topher, if you had 10 minutes, I'll send you the direct link, and it would just be fun to see where you're at on the hero's journey right now.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah.
Right on. It's a photograph, so it's meant to read now in time, kind of like when you're reading, I don't know, transits or that kind of thing, although that's not my subject at all. But speaking of readings, I am opening spots in the new year to do archetype readings for people. This is something I almost never do. It's very rare. I feel like it's an ability and a gift I have. I'm not the person who's just going to tell you all about yourself. It's not like that. This is for the purpose of finding in you clear direction for the year to come. Even though the new year is fake, we still have this indoctrination, right? That there's some potential for rebirth going to happen that might be even just preparing for the real rebirth of the spring. But if you're tired of just troubleshooting the nonsense that goes on in the world or your family or anywhere, then this is a great chance to know yourself, to know the shadows, to know what the work is ahead of you and how that naturally gives you direction. So if you sign up to anything at my website, like that archetype quiz, I'll be letting you know about that on the weekend already. That'll come up. And I want to make sure and give a shout out to my son also, who does the intro and extra music. He's playing the guitar. And so I'm going to drop a link so that if you have the wherewithal to go and sub to him, it's guitars, guns, and knives. And Topher, you might meet him. We might be coming to Missouri in the spring to come and check out your maybe your domes in your abode. And who knows, maybe we'll end up in a dome ourselves.
Beautiful. I can't wait, Beth. It'll be great to see you in person again.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you to everyone in the chat who joined. Some great conversation going on in the background. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and Liam's going to be playing you out. Thanks again, Topher. Bye. Bye for now.